All right, welcome back into the Sports Source, this segment of our show. Brought to you by the folks at Madisonville Marine who want to wish you a very Merry Christmas from Joe Special, Steve Sloan, the whole team down there. They're hoping you have a good Christmas and a very good new year, and we thank them for bringing you the Sports Source year after year. And we welcome in the final member of today's panel, right down there looking in the Christmas spirit. Look at that. You look like you're going to be emceeing something later today. Sterling Hinton, former ball quarterback. Sterling, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, John P.
All right. Josh, I'm going to start with you. You cover recruiting. From what I know and from what we've discussed off air here over the last 3 years, the news that Tennessee might be painting the corners, so to speak, on the recruiting trail wasn't a shock to me. You deal with national writers, you deal with covering kids all over the country. If there is some meat on this bone, do you think people out there who cover recruiting are going to be shocked to find that Tennessee might have bent some rules here?
No, I think there are people who are out there on the recruiting trail covering what's going on in recruiting, going to camps, seeing prospects all around the country. I think at this point they're probably expecting something to come out and be shown to be true with Tennessee, because for the last couple of years, you hear things all the time, but you hear more things with Tennessee. Now, what do you hear and what can you prove? That's really what it comes down to in recruiting, and if there's talk of violations. But there have just been all kinds of rumors with Tennessee. There just have been, with several players who have ended up signing with Tennessee or that have not. I mean, the ESPN report has Marius Mims, and he signed with Georgia. But you hear all kinds of things from national writers who cover recruiting all around the country. And as recently as this week, there was talk about a player or two connected to Tennessee.
More rumors about Tennessee and this staff now than there were about the previous staff?
Yes.
Just to make that clear. Sterling Hinton down there, statute of limitations has run out. You played at Tennessee 30 years ago, my friend. Long time ago. I was over there at the same time, so we're old. But I'll ask you, you also have an eye out on kids today. In terms of when you play, there are people out there who think, oh, all these schools cheat and they all have, every kid's driving a Mercedes. There are other people that think, no, that doesn't go on at my school, that goes on at that school. How many kids out there, either when you were playing or today, have those hands out?
It's amazing. You say when I played, which is ancient history now, and even today, some things never change.
Hieroglyphics of you throwing the football.
Yeah, all that. It's just amazing. The reality is, everybody wants something if they feel like they're giving you something. Everybody's into that, I guess you would quid pro quo term. And these kids learn it earlier now because the information is out there inside their cell phones. I remember when I was coming out, it was when the NCAA first started changing these rules. There was a lot of known extra privileges given to especially star players at certain schools. But then they started clamping down on it. And, when I was one school that was recruited me at one time said, you need to come here, man, because, we get a new this every year we start. And I said, well, I might need to. My mother said, no, you're not. It's just now times are different. And, with the amount of money that's out in athletics right now, and these coaches having so much pressure on them, these kids coming out of high school now, the reality is, it's like picking sides when you're having a pickup game. And if you got the dogs have a chance to play with dogs. Cats don't play with dogs. They can look like they're a dog. A lot of people know how to work out, get off the bus and look like a player. But, it's hard to find those special football players nowadays. And unfortunately, some situations, you have to do what you got to do to get kids now. And I just hope that's not happening here in Tennessee.
All right, let me ask Jimmy, or anybody who wants to chime in here. Let's run through some names. And this is speculation. If you don't want to go there, we won't go there. The names of Maurer and Gray. I have a hard time believing Tennessee was having to pay to get Brian Maurer here, just from the looks of who they were recruiting against. Eric Gray, his name being at the focal point of this, and whether he was paid or not, I don't know. I know that Tennessee had to flip him from Michigan somehow, which I think raises some question marks over the situation. How are these guys involved? Any opinions? Are we looking at straight payments to these guys? Is that what they're looking at? Do you think they're investigating the fact that maybe they're using these guys in other ways here? Go take care. You're the host for these guys. Take care of it that way. Any ideas? Any rumors you're hearing about how or why these names are popping up, or just that they are?
No, I don't know exactly what went down with that. I don't know how they popped up. But one of the things is there's two ways to go about this. You can pay to get a player, or you can pay a player after he gets here. So it could be that once somebody gets here, he starts a few games, and then they find a booster that helps him out a little bit. So that could be the case. I don't know that it is in either one of these situations, but that would be my viewpoint on how you go about it.
Yeah, and facilitating, as you mentioned, I think that can be another way for players on campus with other prospects who are going through the recruiting process.
In other words, you are the recruiting host for this guy. We're giving you this to pass along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's this for the weekend. Now, this has been a different year from a visit standpoint.
Right.
You haven't had the official visits, but players come on campus unofficially and did before the pandemic.
Niedermeyer's name connected to this. Niedermeyer had a great run on the recruiting trail a couple years ago. Thoughts on his involvement in this? If surprised or not surprised in terms of what you hear?
Well, not surprised. And he was very vocal for a while through social media. And Tennessee had a big run in recruiting a couple years ago, as you mentioned, and Brian Niedermeyer helped bring big names to campus. He got some national recognition for it and was vocal, I believe, in the timeline is a little bit confusing, but I'm tweeting out I'm going to Florida.
Right.
You know, letting people know I'm coming out there on the recruiting trail. So very active, and people took notice.
Has he been as active recently? Do you
No.
know? And then the other names that have been connected to this. Now, we're just covering rumors here, and we're not. You don't want to do a show and just dance or not talk about any of this stuff. You have to talk about it. It's being discussed by you, so we're going to try and give our take on it. At the same time, I don't want to make this sound like a news report. So we're discussing rumors here and what's out there. In terms of where this came from, there are people trying to figure it out. Because of Marius Mims, there are people who think that Kirby Smart went to the NCAA and turned Tennessee in for something. One, I don't think the NCAA is investigating yet. I think that UT is investigating. So I don't think Kirby Smart's involved. The other side of that is, if you signed a guy, would you go tell the NCAA that, hey, we signed this guy, they were offering to pay him? Because mightn't the NCAA think, did you offer $1 more? Yeah, how did you get him? The Cam Newton thing. Kirby Smart is one name that's thrown out there. I think a much more plausible name is Jimmy Brumbaugh. That name has been thrown out there as well. Someone who was fired after 4 games. Certainly possible that he might have thrown a Molotov cocktail back inside as he walked out the door. Thoughts on the possibility there?
I guess if you get fired and you're unhappy and you're disgruntled, you might do that. Whether he did it or not, I don't know. If I were investigating, that would be somebody I'd want to talk to, right? Because you've got a disgruntled person that's involved with it. Could he? Could have. I don't know that he did, but it's somebody I'd want to visit with.
Sterling, I'm trying to think. Were you over at UT during the Zook situation? Was that?
I had left by the time it had escalated, but I was there when Coach Zook was coaching. Coach Zook, he's a exciting type guy, to say the least.
How would that, for people who have forgotten, that was a coach that left Tennessee, went to Florida, and well, it's a long story, we don't have time for it here, but in terms of coaches blowing up places on their way out the door, how would that be viewed inside the football profession?
Well, first of all, players wouldn't like it, especially players that committed to a school and had a coach recruit them on the premise XYZ was going to happen, and they're the ones that's violating. You expect the players, the young men, to have the integrity that's worthy of getting recruited. The coaches should have the same. What comes to mind to me is the movie Blue Chips. If you don't know, it's a little old movie when Penny Hardaway and Shaq starred. Try to look at that movie. A lot of interesting points about recruiting. It's a basketball movie, but it's about recruiting and the players and teams and coaches. And you get to learn a little more about the inside, the inner workings of football and basketball programs. A lot of information in that movie. That movie comes to mind right now to me.
There's another one, the program, with James Caan, that was shot at a UT South Carolina football game, as a matter of fact, back in the early 90s. Both those have a little exaggerated, but there's some truth in there.
It's some meat on that bone.
Not just cars, tractors.
Yeah, that's right. When we come back, if Tennessee fires Jeremy Pruitt for cheating, could you then go hire Hugh Freeze? We'll discuss that. Come on back on the Sports Source.